Kuki National Organisation's strong rebuke of MP Bimol Akoijam over PUCL report. The ethnic conflict in Manipur has not only brought devastating violence, but has also triggered deep political debates on the narrative surrounding the crisis. One such controversy erupted when the Kuki National Organisation, KNO, a major umbrella body of Kuki armed groups, launched a scathing attack on Member of Parliament Bimol Akoijam for his recent remarks against the People's Union for Civil Liberties, PUCL, report on Manipur. According to the KNO, Akoijam's attempt to dismiss the PUCL's findings exposes not only his bias but also his alignment with valley-based militant narratives. The KNO has positioned itself as a strong defender of the PUCL tribunal's credibility, pointing out that its composition and independence were carefully designed to avoid local bias. To the Kuki community, the report stands as one of the rare impartial assessments of the violence that erupted in May 2023, while to many among the majority community, the findings have been openly rejected. This divergence highlights the deep ethnic polarization that has defined Manipur's crisis for more than a year. The question of impartiality. One of the central issues raised by the KNO revolves around Akoijam's dismissal of the PUCL tribunal as lacking credibility. The KNO reminded that the tribunal was intentionally formed without local members from Manipur in order to preserve neutrality. For the Kukis, this absence of local representation was not a flaw but a safeguard. It meant that the tribunal's work was less likely to be colored by the ethnic allegiances and political rivalries that dominate Manipur's society. The PUCL report, therefore, has been received by the Kuki community as a fair reflection of their suffering. Its documentation of killings, arson, sexual violence, and state inaction has resonated strongly with victims in the Kuki-inhabited hills. In sharp contrast, sections of the Meitei majority have denounced the report, accusing it of being one-sided. Akoijam's rejection of the report, according to the KNO, is not an act of objectivity but a continuation of this majority view, which seeks to erase or minimize the atrocities committed against Kukis. Echoing the Valley's militant rhetoric. The KNO accused Akoijam of repeating the rhetoric of valley-based groups such as Arambai Tenggol, Meitei Leepun, and COCOMI. These organizations have been vocal in opposing the suspension of operations, SOO agreement, between the Government of India, the Government of Manipur, and Kuki armed groups. According to the KNO, their hostility stems from a desire to deny Kukis any political or territorial recognition within Manipur. The KNO pointed out that these valley groups have consistently painted Kukis as outsiders, drug lords, or beneficiaries of disproportionate financial support. In this light, Akoijam's remarks about funding provided to Kuki groups were seen as a continuation of the same narrative, debunking the financial claims. One of the most striking clarifications provided by the KNO was about the so-called massive financial aid to SO groups. Far from receiving crores of rupees, as has often been claimed in valley narratives, Kuki cadres under the SOO are provided only a subsistence allowance of ₹60 per month. Even this modest amount is not paid regularly. Delays are common, and payments are sometimes made in lump sums. According to the KNO, these lump sum disbursements are then deliberately misrepresented by detractors as large financial inflows amounting to crores. This clarification was not merely about money, it reflected the broader issue of how misinformation is weaponized in Manipur's ethnic conflict. By portraying Kuki groups as heavily funded and resource-rich, valley-based organizations seek to justify hostility towards them, while also framing Kukis as a privileged community undeserving of political recognition. From territorial council to union territory. To understand the sharp political disagreements, it is essential to trace the evolution of Kuki demands. When the suspension of operations was signed in 2008, the Kuki negotiating bodies had demanded only a territorial council within Manipur. This was a constitutional aspiration for autonomy, modeled after similar councils in other northeastern states. However, the trajectory of violence changed the equation. On May 3, 2023, large-scale violence erupted in Manipur, resulting in hundreds of deaths, the burning of villages, and the displacement of more than 70,000 people. For the Kuki community, the scale and intensity of the violence revealed that coexistence within a Meitei-dominated state structure was no longer viable. As the violence unfolded, Kuki demands escalated. First, they demanded a separate administration to guarantee political and physical security. Later, the demand sharpened into a call for union territory status under Article 239A of the Constitution. This demand has since been framed not merely as a political aspiration but as a survival mechanism. According to the KNO, the violence was not spontaneous but engineered by the majority-led state government to deny Kukis any form of autonomy. By unleashing valley-based mobs and militants against Kuki villages, the state was allegedly attempting to crush the political bargaining power of the Kukis. Despite these challenges, the KNO continues to defend the suspension of operations agreement as a cornerstone of relative peace in the Kuki Hills. Before 2008, the region was plagued by clashes, instability, and widespread insecurity. With the signing of the SOO, however, the situation changed dramatically. The agreement allowed cadres to be housed in designated camps. Violence reduced significantly, and everyday life in the hills became more stable. The KNO has repeatedly emphasized that the SOO not only brought security, but also opened economic opportunities. People were able to return to their homes, rebuild their lives, and even access bank loans, something that had been impossible in a conflict-ridden environment. For them, the agreement is not merely a ceasefire, but a social and economic lifeline. Yet, valley-based groups have mounted a sustained campaign to dismantle the SOO, accusing Kuki groups of violating its terms and using it as a shield while pursuing illegal activities. According to the KNO, this campaign is not about the agreement itself, but about denying Kukis the peace and stability that allow them to push for political recognition. Allegations of bias against Bimol Akoijam. The KNO's critique of Bimol Akoijam goes beyond his remarks on the PUCL report. The organization accused him of selective silence on several pressing issues. For instance, despite widespread documentation of rapes and murders of Kuki women, arrests have been rare and justice remains elusive. Investigations by the Central Bureau of Investigation, CBI, and the National Investigation Agency, NIA, into violence against Kukis have been painfully slow. Yet, Akoijam has rarely spoken out on these lapses. Similarly, the daily hardships faced by Kuki residents in the hills, including the lack of access to healthcare, have been largely ignored by him in public discourse. The terror unleashed by valley groups such as Arambai Tenggol in Imphal, which has displaced thousands of Kukis, is another subject on which Akoijam's voice has been muted. To the KNO, this silence is evidence of bias. By attacking the PUCL report while ignoring the brutal realities of Kuki suffering, Akoijam is seen as complicit in the state's larger attempt to delegitimize the Kuki struggle. The PUCL report, as a moral mirror, the PUCL report occupies a symbolic position in this debate. For the Kukis, it is not just a legal document, but a moral mirror reflecting their suffering. Its findings validated their lived experiences and gave voice to a community that has often been silenced in mainstream narratives. The KNO's defense of the report is therefore more than a political act. It is a defense of truth itself. Akoijam's criticism, in this context, was not merely an intellectual disagreement. It was interpreted as an attempt to discredit one of the few documents that acknowledge the atrocities committed against Kukis. The KNO framed this as part of a deliberate strategy to erase evidence of what they call a premeditated pogrom against their people. The clash between the KNO and Akoijam reflects the larger struggle for recognition in Manipur. On one side are the valley-based groups and their political allies, who view the integrity of Manipur as inseparable from Meitei dominance. On the other side are the Kukis, who argue that decades of marginalization, capped by the violence of 2023, have made it impossible to continue under the same political arrangement. The debate over the PUCL report has therefore become a microcosm of the larger conflict. It is not just about what happened in 2023, but about how those events are remembered, recorded, and interpreted. For the Kukis, dismissing the report is equivalent to dismissing their pain. For their opponents, defending the report threatens to undermine their version of history. The Kuki National Organisation's strong condemnation of MP Bimol Akoijam underscores the deep fissures that define Manipur's political landscape. At stake is not just the credibility of a report, but the broader question of whose voices are heard and whose suffering is recognised. By defending the PUCL tribunal, the KNO seeks to preserve one of the few impartial assessments of the conflict. By dismissing it, Akoijam has placed himself, in the eyes of the Kukus, on the side of those who wish to erase their trauma. The debate reveals that Manipur's crisis is not only a matter of guns and barricades, but also of narratives and legitimacy. Until these narratives can be reconciled or at least acknowledged, the path to peace will remain elusive.